And I want you to know there is much light in you even after your disappointments. There is still much work for you to do even after you have been disappointed in this lifetime. For the sake of preaching homiletical integrity, I invite you to our study text this morning, Acts the 18th chapter. We find the Apostle Paul, kind of like Dr. Curtis' story about karate school. We see Paul being broken like that stick in karate class. Thus far for Paul, he has enjoyed great success in the earlier stages of his ministry. If you go back and trace where he has been, he has left Athens on a high and traveled to Corinth, one of the greatest cities of that day. Corinth was located 50 miles from Athens, yet it was totally different. Athens was noted for its culture and noted for its learning. Corinth was famous for its bronze, its pottery works, and its sporting events that some describe were similar to the Olympics that we celebrate every 4 years. Corinth was also known for its immorality and its wickedness. So Paul has his work cut out for him. He's gone, in essence, from a refined city like Athens, and he's gone to a ghetto place like Corinth. Paul has left the oasis of Athens, this beautiful city, this beautiful place, and he has gone into Corinth that is totally different from what he was experiencing in Athens. Now, Athens is where he experienced no persecution, but yet in Corinth, it is a wild and a wicked place. It is in this city that Paul learns how to deal with disappointment really for the first time in his preaching ministry. Paul has encountered disappointment before us today, and he wants us not to so much focus on the disappointment or the failures in his life like we most times do. But Paul wants us to focus on producing and being productive even after we have experienced disappointment. So Paul offers us some salient points of the text, and if you're taking notes, this is a good time to take out your pen and paper, as I have 4 long points that I need to give to you that'll help you on tomorrow. Even if you face disappointment, you still can produce. Here's point number 1. If you want to produce after disappointment, number 1, stop doing what's not working. I know that wasn't deep, didn't say it, I said it too fast. Look at your neighbor, say, neighbor, if you desire to produce after being disappointed, you must stop doing what's not working. Look at the text, verse number 6, if would. It reads, but when they opposed Paul and became abusive, he shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent of it. Listen at what Paul says. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles. Paul says, I'm going to stop doing what's not working. It is here in this verse that we see that Paul has failed to reach everyone. And as a result, he becomes disappointed at what transpires. The Jews who he had worshiped with, watch the text, and preached to every Sabbath according to verse number 4. They opposed him and became abusive towards Paul. Do you see that? The ones that he preached to, the ones that he went to church with, the ones that he prayed with in verse number 4, all of a sudden in verse number 6, they got a problem with Paul and they become abusive against Paul. You know, some of the mean folk, as I've said on occasions before, can be those that sit in the pews of the church. And we find in the life of the text that we are not exempt, as we see that Paul faces disappointment. And as a result of his disappointment, it is not the people on the street that cast Paul away. It is not the people on the street that become abusive towards Paul, but it is the people in the life of the synagogue, the people in the life of the church that treat Paul as if he's nobody at all. He's been trying to persuade the Jews, but he had no idea that they would turn on him like they have done in verse number 6. We see in verse number 6 the pattern of the Jewish culture in opposition to the preaching of the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Paul responds, watch his response, I ain't got to take this. He basically comes to grip with the fact that what I've been trying to do, my methodology, my approach is not successful and it is not working at this present time. So Paul resolves in his mind, I must reevaluate my strategy and reevaluate my game plan, and I must resolve in my mind that what I have been presently doing in verse 4 and 5 apparently is not working. So you can see his frustration, you can see his disappointment. Look what he yells out. Your blood is on your own head. When he makes that statement, he is simply referring to the fact that their destruction and it's their own responsibility for what happens unto them. He's saying, in essence, and I want you to hear me well, Paul is saying, I'm not quitting. I'm simply refusing to keep doing what's not working. And I want y'all to hear me well, and I don't think y'all caught me on that. He's not quitting. He's not throwing in the towel. Paul is simply saying, I cannot continue to use all of my energy to do something that's not working to my advantage or for my good. And how many of us are countless days in, days out, continuing to do the same old stuff, but expecting things to be different and to change in our lives? Baby, that's the definition of insanity, when you keep doing the same old stuff, but yet you're expecting different results. Paul says, I'm not quitting. I just refuse to keep trying something that's not working. I want you to write this down if you're writing. Winners know how to lose, but losers never know how to win. Y'all better hear me and wake up in here this morning. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, winners know how to lose, but losers don't know how to win. In other words, I preached it in Freehold. Some of us got to learn, like Kenny Rogers sung to us, we got to know when to hold them and know. Y'all been in church all your life. You got to know when to hold them, and you got to know when to fold them. Some things you got to know how to cut loose, and some things you got to know how to let go. If it's not working for you, then don't be so proud and prideful that you can't let it go and take a step back from it and say, this ain't working, I must try something different. My mama would say to me, son, it ain't no use to being a dead horse. Still not going to do anything at all. Learn from the disappointment, then make adjustments. But for God's sake, don't keep trying the same old stuff. You must deal with it, evaluate it, and then move on from it. You have to deal with something. Paul says to the church, he says to them in Corinth, all right, Jews, y'all don't want to hear what I got to say. Paul said, you ain't got to kick me out. I'm leaving. All right, y'all gonna make me work? I don't mind. I feel like working this morning. But when they opposed him and became abusive, Paul says, watch this, it's all right to talk about me, but I ain't gonna let you abuse me. Paul says, if you don't want me, baby, I know somebody else that wants me. And I'm trying to help some single women up in here, been chasing after a man, he still don't want you after all you've done for him. Baby, you better learn how to fold him and find somebody else. Y'all take the brakes off. Help me preach in here. You got to know when to hold him and when to fold. If you're spending all your time and your resources and it's not being reciprocated, then that's on you. But you better find you somebody that's willing to give you their name. Yeah, I'm going there. They willing to get into bed with you, but not willing to give you their name. I'm going on. Paul says, see you. I wouldn't want to be you. But Paul says, I'm out of here. Watch the text. I'm in verse 6. I'm preaching the gospel. The text says, Paul, and I'm going to demonstrate it, Paul took off his clothes. I ain't going to take them all off, but he took off his clothes. And watch the text. And watch this. He shook his clothes off. One translation, if you go back to the gospel, Jesus said, shake the dust off of your feet and move on to where God has called you to be. Some stuff you ought to be dusting off this morning. And when you dust it off, don't put it back on, but go on in the direction that God has blessed you to go in.